Good evening. Welcome to Street Talk. As we're finding our way into 2018, I know we're focusing in on our governor candidates. I know there are plenty of people out there that are in exploratory campaigns and plenty of people out there who are actually, as I call it, all in at this point, which is very important. And so we're reaching across the aisle again, and we're having one of our good friends who's I've actually had dealings with up in public health, who I've watched debate out on the floor, and he's a man of distinction, and like myself, he's a wonderful immigrant to this country. I'd like to introduce you all to Prasad Srinivasan, who's running for governor. Not in an exploratory campaign. No, you're all in right now.
Right from day one. Right from day one, when we announced our decision to run for this, to lead our state in the right direction, I knew this is what I needed to do. So right from day one, when we signed up our papers a little over a year ago now, exactly a little over a year ago now. Wow, time flies.
It does.
It does, yeah. And less than a year to go. Less than a year, 11 months to go. But who's counting, right?
Campaigns are nonstop, is what I call it. But you've reached, obviously you still fundraise, but you've reached the goal for the Citizens Election Program. So you're an all-in qualified candidate.
All in, right. All in declared and all in qualified.
Well, you know, that's a big deal these days.
It's a huge deal. It's a huge deal because, as you know, we have to raise $250,000, and the person that can contribute, you know, obviously there are rules and regulations who can and cannot. It has got to be personal contributions, nothing from corporations, nothing from businesses, and the maximum a person can contribute one time, and one time only, is $100. So $100, $250,000, and a small percentage, 25,000 of that, is out of state. Rest of it has to come from in-state. Yeah, and we did that. We've done that in August of this year. We've done that in record time in the history of the state, as to from the time we declared to the time we raised the money is unbelievable.
Well, you know, I like people with commitment.
Yeah.
And I think obviously if you're going to do this job, you have to be committed to the state. I know our biggest issue that we face right at the moment, obviously, is our economy. I know recently, I think the jobs report for November came out, and there was like somewhere over 3,000 jobs lost within that.
Our unemployment is notched up. It is now 4.6, you know, as opposed to the 4.5. And from a national average, we are unfortunately in the wrong direction by 0.5 percentage point. So that's where we are right now, as we speak today.
And so I'll jump right into, well, usually I like to ask people.
Go right ahead.
Before I get into the depths of the economy, why are you running?
Thank you. Thank you for asking that question. I've been asked that question, as you can see, more than once.
I'm sure.
And for me, the reason to run is we have to turn our state around. And Dominic, at this point, if you will indulge me, I just want to share a personal story of mine. You know, in 1980, I finished my residency in Brooklyn, New York, my fellowship in Chicago. I'm an allergist, you know, and as you said, I'm an immigrant, first-generation immigrant. So my wife and I and our child, our 1-year-old son, we could have chosen to go anywhere in the country. You know, we had no roots in Connecticut at that point in our lives. We chose Connecticut. Why? Because Connecticut is a place where you could raise a family, have a great quality of life, and hopefully be successful in your business, in my case, my practice. Fast forward, you know, all of that that dream has come true for us, for my family. Now we've got 2 kids, 4 grandkids, the 5th one on the way in another month. But I look at where we are in our state, and now, will anyone choose to come to Connecticut? That is my concern, and I want that same opportunity. What you make of an opportunity is up to you. The best we can do is provide you the opportunity. Either you take it and run with it, or just sit and do nothing about it. We can tell you what to do. But that opportunity is not there. I see our millennials leaving. I see our seniors leaving. I see our retired employees leaving. That is not the Connecticut of 1980. And that's why, to revive Connecticut and make it prosperous again, that's my goal, that's my agenda. And, giving up a very fortunate, beautiful practice is, I have to step out of that practice for this period of time. I'm willing to do that because that's the right thing for the state of Connecticut.
As I see, it's you're moved and you have your passion here, and I know I'm the last of my family that's here, from my side, and we were immigrants as well. And my dad came to Connecticut because this is where the technology boom was going on, and technology and aerospace and other things along those lines. When you talk about the 80s and the mid 80s, was when Connecticut was at its heyday.
Right, yeah. And we need to bring that back. And remember, on that heyday, I'm sure you remember this, back in 1980, our revenue source, if you look at the revenue source, we had no income tax, we had no casino money, we had no money coming from the lottery, and we did great. We did absolutely great. So it is not so much the revenue stream, which unfortunately is shrinking, no question about that at all, but it is the spending that has got so out of control that we need to tighten up our belts so that we are where we were, and it can be done. It just needs the leadership, it needs the determination. I'm going to get this job done. I'm going to lead the state in the right direction.
Well, so now one of the things I did like, and I know this whole budget session is difficult, and we can go over who passed which budget or when and everything else.
Yeah, absolutely.
At the end of the day, I think it took two sides sitting down and having a policy discussion instead of a line by line review of the budget, because I think it is policy that drives,
of course,
where your spending priorities are. If I was to look at some of the things that came out good from this last time around, one of them would be there's a bonding cap in place. There's also voting on contracts with the different whatchamacallits, and I'm
bargaining units.
Bargaining units. Thank you.
Right. Yeah.
Is being able to change, because I see one of the big drivers of all of this is retirement.
Correct. Big time.
Is being able to change that in statute something that you think that you could foresee, like within your administration?
Absolutely. There are many priorities, obviously, and in the priority list, it's up there on the top. Because just look at this, Dominic. We have, if you look at our health care and the pension obligations that we have, we're talking about $76 billion. It is estimated it's about $35,000 for every man, woman, and child in our state. That's where we are. Unsustainable. It takes away a good chunk of our budget goes into fixed expenses. And so off the $1 that you and I send as our tax dollar, right off the bat, 21 cents are gone. So you're left holding to spend on all of them put together only 79 cents. So would I be looking at pension reform? Would I be looking at healthcare reform? Absolutely. And already have a strategy of the list of things we need to do right from day one. Absolutely.
Well, I know top of my list, and I know we were mentioning this before, is I personally don't think that you should have overtime. And I hate to say this, on some of the other levels, the amount of money that you get for caring for an animal, if you're a state trooper,
right?
I think it should be based on
base pay.
Base pay. Right,
absolutely. I'm sure this is no surprise to you. You've been involved in the system and the process for quite some time now. There are state employees that take home in their pension benefit alone, not the health pension benefit alone, $200,000 on an annual basis. And some of them up to $300,000. And how did that number come up? The $300,000 on an annual basis for the rest of their life. And many of them don't even live here. They've already moved out of our state. So they collect all the pension from your tax and my tax. Yes, we did owe it to them. I mean, I agree, I grant you that. But then they leave our state and then they collect the benefits there. So base pay as opposed to mandated, overtime or straightforward overtime, those have to be excluded from the calculation. I'm sure you heard of all the horrors that are going through at Whiting Forensic right now as we speak in CVH. And what did we find? Look at the physical abuse, the emotional abuse. That's one side of the story. But we're talking economics here. And if you look at, from a financial point of view, it's the mandated overtime, the ×2 that they get, and it's all well planned. I mean, you are on regular overtime. Last minute, you and I have a deal that you call out, and I have to jump in at that point, so I get mandated overtime of ×2. So that system has to stop. Absolutely. It's got to be base pay, which is one of the most important things. And the other one is the cost of living index. The COLA has got to be tied in to Social Security. So yes, we all need a cost of living adjustment. I get that. I agree for that. No problems with that at all. But it cannot be from 2 to 8 or 2 to 7 or 2 to 9%. That's unacceptable. So that's got to be tied in with Social Security. And as you know, this has been done. It has been done by a Democratic governor in Rhode Island, just around our corner, and it has been done in Wisconsin by a Republican governor. So we have models out there, which I've studied extensively, because that's how you do your homework, get all your thought process in order, and obviously with adequate support. Can I do it all alone? Of course not. And anybody who thinks they're going to run the show by themselves, obviously don't know what they're talking about. It is a team effort, but you need to put together the team. But more importantly, you need to lead that conversation in the right direction. Pension reform absolutely has to be done.
So now, is there any way to go back? I mean, are we kind of like in the position where I know there's been different contracts that have been signed at different times,
right.
And there's I think like 5 or 6 different tiers of pensions. Is there any way to go back in and take a look at those older? Because I see a lot of like the initial tiers are, I mean, I hate to say it, they go back to some 20 years, 20 plus years ago.
Right. You're right. Yeah.
And I think at the time,
right.
Benefits it might have been somewhat equivalent to what was in the public sector, and I think things have changed over the time to the public sector.
Right. Yeah.
But are we locked in permanently with those people who have those? In those different tiers?
I mean, the approach I would take is, let's have a conversation. Let's get everybody at the table, and we all know the reality. Nobody, you and I don't need to sit here and give a long list of what's wrong with our state. We all know that.
Yes.
But the important thing is not necessarily what's wrong with the state. What are we going to do to move forward in the right direction? So having all the interested parties, all the stakeholders at the table is going to be important, and let's see where the conversation leads us. Is it going to be, looking at COLA? Is it going to look at, can we restructure and go back to base pay? And it's a question of our conversation. Now, there's also a very interesting thought that's been floated around that all of these pension benefits can go through the claims commission process, which, as you know, at this point in time does not allow. We don't have it in statute. The only thing that's excluded is pension contracts and pension benefits. So open it up, but obviously it has to be done through the legislature. It has to be done that all of those can go through the claims process. And if they go through the claims process, then once again we can say, hey, what can we do? How best can we address these issues? But to be fair, these are promises that have been made. And the fault is not with the employee. Far from that.
No.
They were promised this in the good old days, and that's why they took the job, and they did what they did right. So for us to blame the employees, the state employees, is not the right direction. It's the system. It's where were we, where are we, and what do we need to move forward?
Well, I mean, if I were to look into the private sector, I would probably go back to what happened with the car companies at the beginning of 2009.
Right.
And they did go back.
Yeah.
And they did renegotiate.
Correct.
And, you know, they gave certain things to certain people, but the whole thing was
Reopened. Right, absolutely.
Renegotiated.
Right.
It's not a closed book. I think sometimes because people look at it as being in the public sector, that's an impossibility. And as you said, Rhode Island rewrote theirs so that their practice is in state statute.
Right.
And I think certainly this last time around, the unions, when they were offered this last bargain, were so quick to take it because I think they knew that if they didn't, then the alternative might be that there was going to be this change that happened along those lines. And I think the deceptive part of that bargain, or the last negotiation out, was it helped you for the first 2 years, but then the out years you have raises that go 3%, 3%, 3%,
right.
And now you've pushed out another 5 years beyond where we were,
right,
to be able to discuss
10 years. So we're talking about 10 years. What I call it as 5 legislative sessions, 2.5 governors.
Yes.
So it is not going to be not only for me, but for me and the governors to come down the line. 2.5 governors, their hands are tied. But I really don't think so. You've got will it be challenged? Of course, it'll be challenged. And will you be ready to meet the challenge? You have to be. And when you look at every study, every conservative study, every think tank that looks at the benefits right now, when you look at what's out there in private sector and what's out in public sector, the salaries are pretty comparable. But it's the benefits that make the difference. 45% higher in the public sector compared to a private sector when you combine everything together. How can that be sustainable? That's the conversation we need to have.
Well, the other one that comes in there is with people who are in the line of duty type jobs. The cost actually jumps up to 200%.
Right.
Because they can be able to retire after 20 years.
Right.
Now, one of the things, and we haven't even jumped back into talking about whiting forensic, I guess I was reading this the other day, was one of the main gentlemen that was brought charges against.
Right.
Actually filed his pension papers right before he so he retired before he was charged.
Right.
And I know there's been similar situations, even right down to our governor, who still gets his a pension, not Governor Malloy, Governor Rowland. I'll be clear about that one.
Right.
Governor Malloy has not been indicted in anything.
Right.
Governor Rowland was. Should they be able, if they do things in the line of work which are illegal, should we have recourse against that so that somebody isn't in the position to collect
the pension benefits? Absolutely, I think so. But once again, that will need a change in far as our statute is concerned. This case point that you're referring to right now, since and the amount is almost about $7,000 is what I heard. $7,000 on a monthly basis is what the pension is going to be. So you can just imagine that this person has done this horrific thing, and is being charged on the one hand. At the same token, the way we are as far as the state is concerned, and the way we are tied down, handcuffed, we still owe it to the person like we did to the governor, to the ex-governor. So to me, that is one of the things we have to look at, that in the line of duty, in the line of your job, in the line of what you do, if these are accusations that have been, and proven, of course. Fortunately, we live in a country where we are innocent till we are proven guilty. So when that were to happen, I don't think that it is fair for the taxpayer to bear that burden. And I would definitely make sure that those I's are dotted and the T's are crossed as far as that part of the legislation is concerned, which is one of the weak links, or the weak links that we have as far as our system is concerned. I would definitely address that.
So now, you talk about assembling a team. Obviously, you're the executive branch,
Correct.
and you get to choose all the commissioners and the people that are involved. I know different people have different management styles of how they like to work with their team. I know our current governor is very hands-off, as I've experienced that directly myself. How do you see your role as the executive manager?
Right.
Being when you're working with your team and the different departments that you're responsible for?
And in that, thank you for asking that very, very important question, because to me, it's going to come second nature to run what needs to be run as far as the state is concerned. I'm a physician in private practice in Hartford and in Glastonbury for over 35 years. So we have grown our practice from one location. So now we have about 4 different locations. We've added more healthcare providers. So we are expanding in our own practice. And in that, running the practice, of course, as a physician, seeing the patients is important, but also you need to have management styles. You need to have a technique where you're running this practice. And this small, yes, you might say, oh, big deal, it's a small business, it's a mom and pop shop. No, but that's the point where you learn the techniques. You learn how to manage a business. And the management style that I have is a combination of hands-on and hands-off. Am I going to, you're my supervisor, you're the one in charge. Am I going to be breathing down your neck every single moment? The answer is no. But am I ready to call you to the carpet? The answer is absolutely yes. So it has got to be a combination of the two. When I look back, at the presidential models, when I think in terms of Jimmy Carter, and he had to have his hands in everything. That was, he was so detail-oriented that I said, gee, that's a person you do not want to, to emulate, because you can't be, as the executive leader, you can't be there responsible for turning the lights on and switching the lights off at the end of the day. It doesn't work that way. Ronald Reagan, on the other hand, had a different style altogether, and he was, like you said, a little more of a hands-off, and gave different people their responsibilities. But he had that sense of where he needs to get involved in a particular issue. So that's the balance that you need to get. You need to be involved, but at the same time, you need to give all the staff, all the way, the right latitude so they can perform to the best of their capacity.
I always look at it as, and I've certainly I've been involved in management for multiple years. My favorite thing is to do what I call management by walking around. Sometimes you got to go look for yourself. Right. Sometimes you can take the word for what somebody's saying, and you can look at all your sort of like dashboard of how things are going.
Right.
But there's sometimes that you don't really get that full perspective until you go down and you walk around and you talk to some of the people, in the lower levels, to know exactly how things are on the front line. And I know that's why I say I know this governor, he looks at it from like a 30,000-foot perspective. He's way up here, he's flying the plane, and he's like looking down at it, and there's so much that you miss. That way.
And also it gets you connected, right? Because you do this, when you do the walk around and walk through, and even spend a minute or two or something like that chatting about what is their job responsibility and how are they doing that, it gives you an understanding as to what they're doing. and they get involved, you get involved. To me, it's a win-win situation. It's got to be the right combination.
And I guess, and this is my other big thing that I bring up for everybody, and certainly the ones that I'm looking at as governor in waiting or opportunate.
Thank you.
Is I've been through 8 years or 7 years. Well, I'll call it 8 years because there's the campaign too.
Right.
Of dealing with a governor who I don't know. The bristles on his neck come up like at all times and points of view. I know you worked with the legislature,
Right.
so you know the process. You're not coming from outside of this.
Right.
How do you feel about working with all the different parties? Because I know at times, the relationships. I think a lot of stuff obviously gets carried out in the media, but even hearing directly from some of the people that are at that level,
Right.
there isn't that same sort of relationship. How will you be working with all the parties involved, so to speak?
And you have to.
Yeah.
And that, when somebody says, oh, this person is an insider. No, it's not an insider. You have inside knowledge of how things work, and that's critical. You need to develop a relationship of what the process is all about. What is it that you need to do to move anything forward? And nothing happens, by one party alone. It's got to be, and right now the way we are in the legislature, 72, 79 as far as the House is concerned, 18 in the Senate, so obviously nothing moves forward unless it's a bipartisan approach. So you need to know what needs to be done. How are you able to connect? How are you able to convince? And how are you able to communicate are essential skill sets that one needs to have to move things forward. At the same time, you know that certain legislation is bad, and you've got to block what needs to be done to prevent it from moving forward. And for 7 years, I've been doing that. Right from day one. I'm very fortunate being a physician. Right off the bat, in my second term itself, I became ranking in public health. So, having that position in the topmost position for a minority party in such a committee as public health gave me plenty of opportunity over and over again in the last 6-7 years to have to sit down and discuss legislation, move things forward or block it, and that's an important, very important skill set that you will need. And if you go back and look at my track record, and which is important for anybody to look at and say, I have worked extremely well and to work with both sides of the aisle, and have been able to cross over Democrats over to our side, because that's the right thing to do as far as the state is concerned. At the end of the day, Dominic, we got one thing I firmly believe in, that each and every one of us who comes there to Hartford has the right intention, has the best intention. Their intention is not, make money for myself or, do something bad for the state. No, I don't believe in that. So when you believe, but we have a different philosophy. We have a different approach. But I know at the end of the day, at the bottom of the heart, you're there on behalf of your constituents. You're there because of certain beliefs, strong beliefs that you have. And how do we make that work together has got to be an important thing. And what comes in there is my medical background. Being in practice for this length of time, you are always in communication, day in and day out. In private practice, I'm not a doctor on the bench. I'm on the bedside doctor. So you're by the side of the patient, day in and day out, 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours a day. For this 35 plus years, you develop that skill set. It almost comes natural. Hey, this is what you need to do. And you get the body language. I'm not going to do this, doc. I don't believe in this. Well, let's sit and talk. Let's see why this is important. Or what, I'm ready to give up a little too. So those are important skill sets I think any and every legislator should have. And obviously, when you're seeking the position to lead the state, obviously an extremely important skill set.
I think a lot of people like to classify themselves as outsiders, and I don't think that that's always such a great thing. I think you have to have years of perspective of working in different industries before you walk into
Right.
a government role in order to be able to carry that kind of perspective in anything that you do.
Right.
I find that important. I know, speaking of healthcare, obviously it's something that impacts my life. It impacts the lives of the people that I work with. I'm hoping that some tinkering with the system on the federal level is not going to be disastrous
Right.
for us on a state level. What would you prioritize, I guess, if they went to a situation where on the federal level they were going to do block grants for Medicaid?
Right.
And do you see like those sort of changes on the horizon? And how big of a thing is that going to be to manage?
Well, it'd be a huge thing. It'd be a huge thing. I mean, almost to the point of being disastrous. That's the way I would look at that, because obviously when the Affordable Care Act was rolled out, they had the good aspects of the Affordable Care Act, and obviously a long litany of things that were not done right. So, but at the end of the day, it has its positive facts, components of that we have to become part and parcel of what the new law is going to be. So should we just repeal and replace? Sounds great, sounds very fancy, but it's got to be done the right way. You can't just repeal for repeal's sake unless you have a fair system to replace. So am I in favor of repeal and replace? No, unless the replacement part is done correctly. Even right now, in the new bill, the tax bill that was just passed, the individual mandate, as you know, has been taken away. I have concerns. I have mixed feelings about that, because we are talking about individuals who are relatively young, who are relatively healthy, who now have no reason to go out and buy insurance anymore. And then, but what happens? When there's a car accident, what happens when they get into a disaster situation? Who's going to foot the bill at that particular point in time? So I think for requiring all of us to carry health insurance was, in my opinion, the right thing to do. But had we gone through the process in a better way and implemented that, which we did not do, which is one of the limitations of the Affordable Care Act, that's what I would focus on. And so I am very concerned, extremely concerned about what is going to come down from D.C., or should we say up from D.C., from a physical point of view.
I mean,
I'm very concerned.
It's a big one on my behalf. Obviously, I have a son who has a rare disease, and we do everything we possibly can to make sure he doesn't end up being hospitalized, and we know how to do that better now. But I always have to carry the highest level of insurance. Because of that situation. But the rates of insurance are, even on the exchange, I mean, they went up. Oh God, my bill went from like $1,400 to $1,850 just in 1 year, to the point where I have to look at how I'm doing business and possibly change around from being an LLC to an S Corp, to see if I can, get through business plans. But
right. Yeah.
I have a big fear that, obviously I don't qualify for anything, any incentives on the exchange. I pay my full bill, but I have a big fear that of the system collapsing in that way. And like I said, I worry about what they're going to do with Medicaid and whether they're going to put that. Because a lot of people do get their insurance through Medicaid and their system, and if they block grant it, I mean, yes, it's going to be up to the states how they spend that money.
And there I would do, let's say, if we would have come, even forget the block grant part, even Medicaid reform, which I think is important, and I've already, over these, serving and ranking and in public health, I've always looked at that. But those inefficiencies that we have in the system, as it is right now, have to be addressed as well. I mean, there are ways that you can deliver the same quality of service, You're not compromising quality at all, but in a more cost-effective way. I'm sure you've heard of the Federal Qualified Health Centers, the FQHCs, which are across the state. Now they deliver services, top quality service across the board at a fraction of a cost. So educating our patients, educating the consumer, which is in this case the Medicaid, or it can be private insurance as well, that there are these alternate systems as opposed to relying on emergency care. Promoting preventive health, that's important. So if for me saying, you know what, I'm going to charge you a $10 copay or a $20 copay for preventive health, which might be the barrier for you not seeking that, I would say, you know what, that's where I would want to spend my dollar, because preventive health is going to have its long-term consequences for years down the line. So we have to fine-tune. Transportation, it's a disaster. Medicaid transportation has been abused excessively. So there are abuses in the system. Do they need transportation? Of course they do. But you know what? Not everybody needs their transportation. And I have a hands-on experience. I'd be walking in. From the parking lot to my office, and these people in the livery service being dropped off, and they're coming to see me or see others in the same building, and they have this medical transportation. I don't get it. So the abuse has got to be looked at, transportation being one of them. Excessive use is there. I mean, when you have private insurance and I have private insurance, there are some guidelines. You can only do this, you can't do this. Whereas in Medicaid, there are no such limitations as such. So the abuse, the overuse, so those are the things that we need to look at. And as you know, 20% of our state at this point in time, 1 in 5 are on Medicaid, are on Medicaid alone. I'm not even looking at Medicare. Medicaid alone is 1 in 5.
And I know when I take a look at it from a rare disease standpoint, this is one of the reasons why we were pushing for our task force, is sometimes there's ways to do things which may cost money, but in the longer run save money. So for rare disease, they account for children. They account for 40% of all the dollars spent in the medical system. And there's certain foods or other things that can be given to people that where if they were, charged at a certain rate or, were made more economically viable for people, they would choose to do those things rather than end up in a hospital. Because, for me personally, the most god-awful experiences are the days that I've had to take my kid into the hospital in an emergency. Right. And I want to avoid that at all costs. But like you said, healthcare is complicated. Right. It's 20% of our economy, if not more in Connecticut. Right.
And look at it, when we look at our GDP, and we look how we compare ourselves to our European colleagues, we spend much more as a developed nation on healthcare, and our outcomes are less, not as good as what we have across the other side of the ocean. So obviously, whether it be the cost, the quality of care, and the third part of it is the access. All of that we need to be addressing, because access is very critical. I mean, you could have all the insurance that you want, but if you don't have anywhere to go to with that particular card of yours, what good is that card going to do to you? And that we need to address. And there we come back to the economy once again, because as you know, we have 3 medical colleges now. We have UConn, we have Yale, and now Quinnipiac has graduated students as well. But what do I see? They graduate, they get a top-class education in our state, and they leave our state. We are not able to retain the graduates that we get out of these 3 institutions, like other institutions as well, whether it be law, whether it be UConn, or the others, and that's something we need to address. But that's a bigger global concern, which is obviously, as a governor, we would have to address moving forward. We need to retain our millennials, we need to retain talent, and we need to retain our seniors. That's got to be a very important part of anyone's platform, and they're definitely mine.
So where do you see the cities?
cities.
being within that, because obviously I get the whole idea that we need to have these vibrant centers in order
Correct.
to be able to attract people or
Right,
keep them in
right,
this
yeah.
area.
No, thank you for, and that is an area we need to focus on. We can't just let the cities, leave them alone and say, you know what, I'll take care of the suburbs, and that's what I'm going to take care of. No, we are intertwined. Our lives are intertwined, the cities and the suburbs. I live in Glastonbury, which obviously is a suburb of Hartford, and similarly, whether it be Bridgeport or the New Havens or anywhere else, it's important that we take care of our cities, and our cities are vibrant. What are the problems we see in the cities? A is crime. So what is a better system that we have in policing crime, A, in developing a relationship between the community and the police force. So that's something that we need to be working on in a better relationship. Diversity training, as far as our police force is concerned, is extremely important. So, obviously, our policemen and women do a phenomenal job, whether it be the suburbs or the cities. And so we need to make sure we protect them adequately, whether it be body cameras, whether it be cameras in their cruisers, and at the same token, hold them responsible as well. So we need to give them the protection that they need, and at the same time, we need to make sure that a community also feels safe with them and not feel that they're out there, in a particular form or the other, getting hold of them. That's unacceptable. So we've got to police crime better. That's got to be done. We've got to look at education. Ultimately, it all begins with education, right? And as you know, in education, which I'm not sure time will permit us to talk about, but I hope it does,
You could talk about it right here, because it's important.
Extremely important, because the children of today are the citizens for you for tomorrow. That's the future of our state and the future of our nation. And spending money on a student, we've seen over and over again, does not necessarily translate into better outcomes. In Hartford, per student, we spend about $14,000 on an annual basis. Glastonbury, where I come from, we spend $1,300 of state money from that we get. So where is 1,300? And where is the 14,000? And the outcomes as far as education, Glastonbury is among the leading towns as far as the state is concerned, and Hartford is in a crisis mode. So we've got to look at, how are we going to improve the education so the system is better. And in that, the family involvement has to be there. I look at education as the four pillars: the student, the family, the teacher, and the Board of Ed. And unless they all work together in a very cohesive way, we are not going to be just getting the outcomes that we look at by throwing, let me make 14,000 into 15,000 and get the better outcomes.
Well, the difference obviously is that's the amount of state funding. I wouldn't want to represent that you spend $1,300 per student. That's money that's coming from the state level. The rest. Much like my city, obviously, we lost money in state educational funding. But we make it up in property taxes or monies that we have to put towards that. But I think education, really comes down to how do we train our workforce to be able to produce the next level of jobs. And I know we're in an economic shift, much like when we went from agricultural to industrial, from industrial to a service economy. I think there are opportunities that we have in advanced manufacturing. And in other areas,
healthcare, absolutely,
that are going to be the opportunities of tomorrow. I think much like I had a friend of mine who was a state rep a few years ago. He came up with the idea of teaching computer languages as a language. At the middle school level.
At the schools, absolutely.
Where they teach French and Spanish and other things, because that's really going to be one of the languages that people and the skills that people need to come out. So I agree. There has to be all those pieces in there together. It's And I know in human services they were working on different models to be able to help bring people out of poverty and get them the education and the other pieces that they need. But I think workforce development is going to be a key to all that, and then helping people to understand that too.
Right, right, yeah. You know, if you said it so well. Advanced manufacturing, that's 21st century. That's what we need to focus on. And do we have the skill sets? Do we have a skill set workforce that's going to be addressing those, these job opportunities we have in our state? I mean, look at electric boat, right? We're going to be having one more submarine on air. So we need to build one more submarine from 2 to 3. Sikorsky has got these huge helicopters that they need to get out, and the commercial jet engines from Glastonbury, my own backyard. I mean, we've got jobs that are available, but jobs are not taken because we don't have the adequate workforce. And those skill sets, they've got to begin not at the end of school, but right somewhere in middle school, and translate that into the college experience, whether it's a 2-year college experience. And I'm a strong supporter of vocational schools. I'm a champion on that. Does everybody need to go to a 4-year school? The answer is no.
No.
If you choose to, sure, of course. I mean, nobody's going to be standing there in your way. But you also got to give them the opportunity and give that feeling that this is a great job. This is your career, and this is what you decide to do. And as you know, they're extremely well-paying jobs, and then putting food on the table and clothes on the back of the children, taking care of your family. The pride of each and every one of us is to take care of our own families, and then also give a helping hand. That is what society is all about. Take care of yourself first, and then at the same time, always have a little reserve so you can help those that are less fortunate than you. And if that is done from an individual level to all of us collectively, that's the better tomorrow. That's a better state.
And similarly, I think as we're going through this transition, I think being able to re-educate our workforce as this obviously comes up, because things are going to be changing.
Yes, absolutely.
And
right,
obviously, I look at robotics, AI, and I think, and I'm hoping, it's a complementary situation which helps our economy grow. But I think that also means you have to have people that have more knowledge about how to be able to work within that.
It's a different skill set.
It is.
And that skill set has to be developed, has to be maintained, and kept to the cutting edge. What you and I learned 20 years ago is good, but that's not going to be good enough in the 21st century. And so we need to keep up with technology. We need to keep up with what is the cutting edge today, and as an industry, and need to move forward with that. Absolutely. So those are, when I look at where are the opportunities in our state, where are the areas we need to work on, those are, when you combine all of them together, is what you will get, what we're looking for, when you're able to revive Connecticut and make it prosperous again.
And I see that you've been on the Environment Committee.
Right. Yeah.
And how do you feel that we can help, or as governor, would you continue to push forward some of the changes in the system? Like, I know, for example, I have solar on my house.
Yeah.
I love my solar.
Right,
I got in on one of the green banks,
and
I'm very, very happy with the way it ended up. And I use high efficiency heat pumps and other things along those lines. Are there still going to be incentives or other things that help to make that available, to make the changes that we're going to need for our electric grid?
We have to, and I will be a strong supporter of that. And clean energy, we've got to head in that direction. That's tomorrow's future. It's the future. The environment is the earth. We've got to give back to our children and our grandchildren. So we can't just sap ourselves of all the resources that we have and say, gee, what, I'm done. Well, when you're done, it's not done.
No.
The world continues. Life goes on, and you need to make sure you leave behind the right footprints and not the wrong footprints in the sand. As you saw, we had mandated that all our state buildings, right, they've all got to be together, and they've got to be, clean energy. Guess what? It's not happened. It's not happened. The buildings, I forget the number, we have about 3,000 or 4,000 different accounts, and for the number of buildings that we have that are state-owned, and they're all supposed to be connected and communicate with each other and become energy efficient. So that was the goal that we had set for ourselves as to lead by example. Let's do it in the state buildings, let's do it in the state offices, so then I can go to me as a private citizen and say, hey, you should do this as well. So we've got to do that. I'm a strong supporter. We've got to go with clean energy.
Now, obviously, going along with the clean energy, I know he's going to tell me I got 5 minutes left.
Exactly. Oh my goodness!
That's always. I have my long list of things that are obviously.
I thought we had a whole hour.
Important. Yeah, we're almost.
Oh my goodness! I didn't realize that. Oh my God! I thought we just got started.
I'll save the last couple of minutes for you,
Sounds
but I know along those lines, you talk about revenue shrinking, and I think with the next level of technologies, our money that we receive from gas taxes is going to be shrinking.
Right.
And I think we have to look at alternatives because transportation.
Oh my goodness.
Is I should probably leave more than 5 minutes for this, right? Transportation's gonna be a big issue. I know we don't have what I call. Did we get in a transportation lockbox?
No.
So I think certainly that's key because.
Correct.
I think one of the most disheartening things to me whenever I look at when we hit the end of the budget year is all of a sudden you get all these accounts that people think are going towards that.
Correct. Special accounts.
Wiped.
Right. They call the way we are set up, everything goes into the general fund,
yeah.
and from the fund it goes to the special fund. The block right there, it stops right at the general fund. I mean, and the reason that a transportation lockbox, a true lockbox, is critical because otherwise we have all these revenue streams, and then they go into the general fund, they get blocked there, and I go back to the tobacco settlement fund. Right? And what happened to the tobacco settlement fund? Millions of dollars get to the account to this day on an annual basis, and just a fraction of it goes to the causes it's meant: tobacco cessation, education, so on and so forth. That was the whole purpose. And no, a percentage of that, small percentage, a pathetic percentage, goes into that particular cause. And that's why transportation is the economic engine. There's no question about that at all. I mean, they are the arteries for our state. You've got the large arteries, the medium and the small. Once again, getting back to my medical analogy, but those arteries can't be clogged up. They've got to be vibrant. They've got to be open so that we can move around. I go to many of my conventions, medical conventions, ending up invariably in New York or Boston if we chose the closer ones. And I always say, why not UConn? Why not Yale? Why can't we get the same? We have the talent, but we don't have the transportation. And so people coming in from the state, from across the nation and internationally, they find it a lot easier, obviously, to land up in Boston or Hartford. So we have these opportunities, but lack of transportation, it doesn't happen. So we've got to address transportation. It is critical moving forward that we have that economic engine revved up.
Well, I know I'm going to give you the last 2-3 minutes just to talk about your campaign and where you're at right now, and I'm certainly looking forward to working with you on biopharmaceutical, and I hope you come on the 28th down to for our rare disease open house down at the atrium. But I want to give you the last couple of minutes to be able to talk about your campaign, and you can talk to your constituents. So,
thank you for the opportunity, Dominic. I'm glad to be here and have this conversation. And I love this format where we have a conversation for a period of time. And you told me an hour. I said, oh, that's a good amount of time. Little did I realize again that just goes by.
You do know you're just going to have to come back. That's all.
I would love to come back. I would love to have come back. I'm in a very happy position right now because, the important part of a campaign, critical as any other campaign is, to make sure you have enough funds in the coffers. So we have done that part, so that housekeeping fortunately is behind us. And now it's a question of having my message, which I am honing in and becoming very clear and concise on what I need to convey to my constituents who are not just in Glastonbury anymore, but 169 towns, which is challenging, but I'm ready for the challenge. I'm going around, as I said, I'm a declared candidate for over a year now. So for a year I've been going to the towns, the four corners of the state, including the center, and with my message. And my message is, what do we need to do together to revive Connecticut and make it prosperous again? And that's the message which I'm taking around. It's resonating, and we need the change. Not just because for a change, we need the right change to steer our state in the right direction.
Well, I certainly thank you for coming on today. Obviously, it's been a pure joy working with you and up in public health. And, as I said, I watch you up on the floor. You're very concise. You're very detailed. Your knowledge base and everything that you present is excellent. And we look forward to seeing you can continue to run and be on the campaign trail.
Thank you.
And hopefully you'll be able to come back around again. And we'll have you on, and we can finish off the other areas that we have to discuss.
And I want to wish everybody a wonderful holiday season and a very healthy and a happy new year.
You as well. Thank you. So I guess we can run the street about this point in time. We hit that 55-minute mark.